the break. Explain to me your perspective on what's happening. I mean, is this like Caligula marrying his horse or Nero committing suicide? I mean, is the elite going insane like Hitler attacking Russia? Or is there some method to this, Mr. Dent?
Well, no, there's not to me. Like you said before, people are destroying natural systems. The free market capitalism is a natural, organic, biological system that needs the dynamics of opposites. It is being overmanaged. They're trying to run the economy like it's a machine. You know, they're not. They don't. We have the worst immigration policies in the world. I'm just back from Australia in February and about to go back in July again. They have the best immigration policies in the world. You know, you have to be qualified to get in. They attract the people they want. You can't just run across the borders. They're surrounded by an ocean, so that makes it a little easier for them. We've got horrible immigration policies, but we have even worse financial policies. The government is basically running our economy now on like artificial drugs, and that never works out well. They're not allowing debts to rebalance. They're not allowing bubbles to rebalance and the economy to rebalance. They're just saying the economy can't slow down. They've taken over the economy, and again, trying to run it like it's an inorganic machine, which it's not. So, you know, I hear all the stuff you say about, you know, pollution in the environment, you know, modified foods. Well, I mean, I was just listening to guys saying, you know, our intestines are all screwed up because we've overused drugs and antibiotics so much that we've killed all the good bacteria while fighting the bad. I mean, we don't have enough respect for the wisdom of natural systems. Adam Smith said it, you know, the invisible hand, how our economy runs from the bottoms up. If you just set some good rules and let innovation happen and let booms and busts happen and let inflation and deflation happen. In my work, inflation and deflation are the critical incentives for innovation. And if you don't allow this to happen, and most of the innovations happen in bust, not in boom, and then they come into our economy in the boom. So economists, to me, politicians, do not understand our economy. They have kind of hijacked it. They are running it for elite interests. The top 1% has run away with almost all the gains now for decades. And by keeping this bubble going, after creating the greatest bubble in history, debt and financial assets, the government's only policy is to keep the bubble going forever. It keeps the top 1%. Making outsized gains. It fosters all this inequality and polarization in society. It's the worst economic policies I've ever seen in history, and that tells me that it's going to end badly. And of course, I've been warning the last few times on your show as well that the Dow is going to get to somewhere like 17,000, where it is recently. And
by the way, you said that just about a month and a half ago on the show. People can go back to it. That did come true. And in fact, you don't like to brag. Folks can go to your website and see some of the past reports, harrydent.com. But tell some of the people out there some of the predictions you've made that have been spot on. I mean, you do have a very accurate prediction background here. That's who we have on the show, people that are accurate. I mean, you can tune into CNBC most days and just get a bunch of bull because they're being literally told to put that out. I've talked to some behind the scenes. They would lose their jobs, like, you know, Dylan Radigan or whatever, if they don't play ball. So recap for folks some of the big predictions you've made that came true.
Well, first of all, you know, the biggest tool we use of many is demographics. We know exactly when people buy the most cars, houses, when they spend the most money, borrow the most, pay for babysitting, you name it. There's almost nothing I don't know about the life cycle of consumers. And consumers are 70% of our GDP, and businesses who invest when consumers are growing are another 10. Government's only 20, thank God. So we use demographics to predict trends. When I first got these tools in late '89, I came out with my first book, and we predicted simultaneously that Japan would see a giant crash in the 1990s, while the U.S. and Europe would see the greatest boom in history. People thought we were absolutely nuts. Then in the early 90s, when we had the recession that we predicted, we said, no, we're going to come out of this, and the Dow's going to hit 10,000 or higher by the early 2000s, and that happened. We called the tech peak in February and April. We called the internet peak in February and the NASDAQ peak in April, just within 1 month of the peak, and said, look, this bubble, this is a peak. It's going to start to burst. Then we called the housing peak in late 2005. I literally moved from Miami to Tampa in that time period, sold my house in Miami, rented in Tampa, saved a fortune. So I practiced what I preached. And we've been saying now for 20 years that in late 2007, the baby boomers would peak in spending, and we would start to move into a downward economy. Well, we did get our big crash in 2008, right on cue, but governments have just said, well, we won't let that happen anymore. We won't let the economy go down. We won't let banks fail. We won't let companies fail. We won't let debts be restructured or entitlements, which are just off the charts unaffordable. So they're preventing the very crisis that could rebalance our economy, get rid of this top 1% running away with all the gains and everything, but they won't do it. And so what's going to happen instead, they've just created a bubble. They've created a bigger bubble again. And we've been telling people in over the last several months, somewhere around Dow 17,000, a little higher, this bubble's going to peak. It's going to peak soon. And the next crash is going to take us to lower lows than we saw in 2009, about 5,000 to 6,000 on the Dow. That's a very clear pattern, higher highs in each bubble peak, lower lows in each crash. The government keeps stimulating to try to avoid the crisis, but only creates a bigger crisis down the road, just like taking more drugs to keep from coming down. That's exactly what they're doing for natural drugs. Quantitative easing is basically like crack for the economy.
Again, if you just joined us, you can visit the website, harrydent.com/Alex Jones. And you can get a published chapter. So it's an unpublished chapter. That's even better. The demographic Cliff book that's already a bestseller. We're going to go through some of those graphs today as well. If you're a TV viewer watching at prisonplanet.tv or infowars.com/show to find the free feed of the daytime broadcast and transmission. Now, continuing with Harry Dent, if you just tuned in, I'm Alex Jones. We're talking about where the world is today, and so many people send me emails. It is a minority, but I do get a lot of them, and I get it on the street or when I do radio interviews or TV interviews. Alex, why are you such a pessimist? Why are you complaining? Why are you saying this is bad or this is terrible? Well, it's because I want to differentiate what's good from bad. I socially want to wake people up to try to make the world a freer, more open place. Now, if someone disagrees with me about what my views are, that's fine. But it's my free speech. But denying all these trends that are as clear as the nose on my face or your face is the stuff of societal collapse. And if we don't reverse this, we have a managed economy like Japan or Venezuela, two different managed systems. One of them managed much better, but still in a 20-year recession/depression with signs of total societal collapse. Nobody's having kids. You look at Venezuela, they can't keep the lights on. I mean, we know that managed systems don't work. And we know that there's this tiny elite that are scapegoating the free market while they run away with all the gains, creating a giant piranha-like underclass that they are using politically to fully socialize the once great Western nations because the globalists are exempt in most cases from what they've done to us. So what I'm asking you is, how do we politically, I understand it's important to know these trends and understand them so we can individually take care of ourselves and be in a better position, maybe even thrive from it. That's a very moral and smart thing to do. But at the same time, what do you say about political hope? I mean, there's some huge awakening happening on one side, but also incredible arrogance by the ruling class on the other. So where does all this go?
Well, Ali, the only hope I have, and this is exactly what I see happen, a crisis is what gets people clear. I am, just like you, I am crystal clear on debt trends. They're off the charts, the greatest debt bubble in history, and that never ends well. Entitlements are even worse than that. We never even had entitlements in the Great Depression when that debt bubble and financial bubble burst. We got financial assets overvalued again, more than ever, about to burst, and we're going to see a crisis because a lot of wealth is going to disappear when these bubble bursts, and a lot of banks are going to have to fail when people realize the government can't just artificially create growth forever when the demographic trends and the debt trends are down. So I'm clear on this, but I'm also clear, unlike economists, they're saying that China is the new model, state-driven capitalism. And I'm like, you have to be kidding me. China makes Japan or any other managed system look like nothing. China has overexpanded, overmanaged their economy from top to bottom, and talk about crony capitalism. The way you get rich in China is you're the friend with the local Communist Party mafia leader. And that's what it is. It's a big mafia. China has 27% of their condos and homes vacant, overbuilt, giant malls vacant, overbuilt, roads to nowhere, bridges to nowhere, railway stations that nobody's using. They have overmanaged, overbuilt.
Well, let me just stop you for a minute.
Any country in history. That's what this unpublished chapter I'm giving away for free about. It didn't make it in time because I was rushing to get the book out. I got it into the Korean and Chinese and Asian books, but I didn't get it in the U.S. book. So this is the most important chapter. It looks at China thoroughly and shows exactly what's going on, why state-managed capitalism is going to create the biggest disaster in the world. It's going to be the failure of China's managed system that I think is going to most wake up politicians and economists and teach them that the free market system works better as long as you just have some simple rules. And then that's what they've abandoned because they want more. They want to manage.
Sure. Well, they're going to use.
They don't want to have a recession.
Well, I mean, in the brains of the socialist bean counters, the collapsing things gives them more power so that they think they're going to survive it. But if we politically expose them, this could really be the end of them. I agree with you. The crisis they've been helping create and exacerbate is their downfall if we simply tell the truth with a narrative against their narrative. Our narrative, the truth, will defeat their narrative, the lie. But looking at China, you hit the nail on the head right there. Nobody brings this up. When I look at Europe and the U.S.'s elites, what upsets me about the real controlling socialist elite is that, A, they're exempt from what they're doing to the rest of us, but B, they're so anti-freedom, anti-market, anti-male, anti-independence that they don't even want a lifeblood in their own system that they've got control of. But then they embrace, in the Economist magazine every month, as I guess you're talking about that, I see it everywhere, China that has suicide nets, mobile execution vans, forced abortions in their factories, just stuff off the chart evil, rivers getting set on fire, they're so toxic. And then this is the model. A bunch of Chinese generals that are tax exempt making millions of dollars with their corrupt little royalty mafia families. I know I'm ranting here, Harry, but I mean, the fact that our elite loves the Chinese model, the Chinese communist state-run model, shows you how much trouble we're in.
Yeah, you know, these people who love this model ought to go over there and choke on the smog. And like you say, they're the most polluted environment. They're creating the most pollution in the world. They're creating the most, they're adding the most to this global bubble that is just going to burst. And again, that's why we'll talk later about deflation. When you get bubbles burst, when wealth disappears, when debts fail and get restructured, money disappears. Money just disappears and you get fewer dollars chasing the same goods. You get deflation, not inflation. And all this overcapacity and overbuilding. I mean, China's pretty much overbuilt their economy for the next 12 years in advance of urbanization. They've urbanized twice as fast as any country in history, which is dangerous. I mean, they're uprooting all their traditions. They're basically destroying their economy. And like you say, our economists say, oh, wow, this is such a great model because they grow 8% a year and rarely have recessions. And that's an economist's dream. But if you look at it and you get this chapter, believe me, the reason I'm putting all this stuff out like you is I'm going to be there to say I told you so, because people do need to learn. We are going to get this crisis. You cannot keep a bubble going forever. You cannot manipulate an economy forever. You can't take more and more financial drugs and not have consequences. So this crisis is going to hit, but people need to understand why it happened.
We're going to go back to Harry Dent. Again, you can go to harrydent.com/Alex Jones. He's got an unpublished chapter. I kind of halfway read this because I got in late today with the flights. And I was like, oh, he's posted one of his chapters. No. He already had some of the chapters I saw up on the site a few months ago when it first came out. But this is an unpublished one that really came out after the book. And we're going to talk about his predictions now. And perhaps he can explain to myself and others out there what he's getting at saying it's deflation, not inflation. And I just want to talk to him about what I'm seeing. But tomorrow, and I may even do like an hour overdrive today because I got here late. Some stations carry that fourth hour. I want to get into a bunch of this news and take your phone calls. I'm not sure if I have time to do that yet, but we'll see. I'm just more reflective now because I like to scuba dive. I like to snorkel. I never get to do it. So I went down to the Caribbean and I'd be on the boat and they'd be being real nice to me with all these other people on the boat, going snorkeling or scuba diving or going out to see the stingrays or going out to be on a wreck. And they would just, can we have a photo now at the end? And I'd say, what's going on? Oh, we're all listeners. And again, one of the tour guides would be a cop who also runs a company to go out and see the wreck. Or it would then be, I mean, I did probably like 6 or 7 of these tours, sometimes 2 a day. And every time they were listeners. I'd be in a grocery store and a cop would walk by and go, Alex Jones, like what you're doing. I'd be in a dive shop and there'd be, 3 black Caribbean guys in there. They'd all go, that voice, you're Alex Jones. I like what you say. I have a lot of the same views. We listen. And again, I'm not up here bragging, hey, I got a bunch of listeners. What I'm saying is we should be able to turn this around if Tea Party candidates are winning, not just here, but in Europe. Le Pen and the UKIP party all over Europe. I mean, they got the biggest gains in the EU election. And it's happening here. So we're going to go back to Mr. Dent here in a moment. I just want to tell people this is exciting. Because I learned at this particular Caribbean island, they would never say anything when you're at a restaurant or wouldn't say anything when you'd gone out and done your trip. And at the end, they would say, I'm a listener. Or they'd be sitting there holding me in like reverence. And I could tell, I go, you're a listener? Well, I didn't want to bother you, sir, but we really appreciate you. I mean, it's just amazing. Amazing that I can go to England. People saw live feeds of this at Bilderberg 2 years ago, or now a year and a half ago. And I just go to Big Ben, do a live feed, and there's people walking by the scores, and like half of them are stopping. Alex Jones, Alex Jones. Quite frankly, I don't know where these numbers are at because we have millions a day we can track to visit the sites, listen to the show, and AM and FM stuff. But I don't know where the numbers are, where it's all coming from. YouTube, that can't be it. All I'm telling you is government has a 7% approval rating right now. We should be able to beat this. We should be able to take the country and the world back. That's what I'm getting at here. Now, before we go back to our guest here, this whole broadcast is listener supported. I can hire more reporters. I can pay my reporters better. I can get better equipment. You've seen the new studio. We'll be doing the show out of there full time soon, but I've been doing a lot of special reports out of there. What I did last week was before I left town, I taped a bunch of reports. Then they aired them live on the show with David Knight, who was live, but they had taped to air, obviously, my clips. And we're building all of this because of your support, and it cost a lot. I don't want to get into how much it costs to run this whole operation a year, but one reason it's been successful is that it's got to be 95% of the money that comes in here and put it right back in the operation. And then over the years, have created a fund in case the whole economy shut off so we could keep running 3-4 months. When you talk about collapse, it really scares me because in a collapse, we need to be prepared and we need to get as big as we can before the collapse comes so that we've told the story, so that we have a position to go to the next level to really try to change history. That's what I'm into. I'm not into fancy things. I'm not into money. Not there's anything bad about it. I'm into money because it gives me freedom. The elite want to make you poor under their control because they want to run your life. And we sell the best products, the best supplements, the best made in America t-shirts and Molon Labe belt buckles that are selling so fast they'll be gone in 2 weeks at this rate. InfoWarsStore.com. We've got the great anti-socialism shirt that's the best seller. We've got everything at InfoWarsStore.com, InfoWarsLife.com, InfoWarsHealth.com, 888-253-3139, 888-253-3139. And just please continue to support us in the free market. This is true free association. I mean, I like being a good guy, and I like having high-quality products I'm proud of. That's just normal instincts to be successful. Good guys, end up being successful because you treat people like you want to be treated until you get a rigged system. But we sell the best products because I really only want to sell you the best water filters at the lowest price that really are number one and destroy the competition in gravity-fed filters, ProPure. I really want to sell you the best Nascent Iodine. I really want to sell you the best Super Male Vitality. That's just done amazing things for my energy, my libido, you name it. I really want you to get these products and get a great deal and be blown away by the quality of them. And then fund our operations so we can all be successful together. Because I'm defending family rights, the Second Amendment, sovereignty. We're here. Because it's survival. I don't deserve to be patted on the back. I deserve you to stand right beside me. And that means financial support. And that means the armies of people that listen. need to tell other people how they can listen or pass forward those videos, pass forward those news articles, those clips. Everybody should send the link out of harrydent.com/Alex Jones to read about this. So when this all comes down, people then understand our credibility goes even higher. Why do you think the show's exploding? Why do you think Harry Dent's popularity is exploding? Or Rand Paul's or Ted Cruz? Because, folks, we're on the deck of the Titanic saying get to lifeboats. Now, I've been ranting, sir. It's just that I think it's important before we get into the economy and where it's all going, and some of your charts you're about to show here for TV viewers. Radio listeners will be able to find this on YouTube tomorrow or prisonplanet.tv tonight, but there's a free feed at infowars.com/show right now. But briefly, and then I want to get into inflation. Briefly, I mean, I'm not a technical financial scientist like you. I just look at it with street smarts as a layman. But how would you quantify what I just said? Do you agree with it about the awakening, A, or B, am I being too optimistic? I mean, what does your gut tell you?
No, I think I study a lot of cycles, Alex, and one of them is a 250-year revolutionary cycle, as in the Revolutionary War 250 years ago, and the whole Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith and stuff. We're ripe for a major revolution. Things do go towards more freedom, even though at times they go the other way. And I think that's what's going to come out of this. And I do think it's important. I've got the same mission you do. I'm just warning people. The media doesn't want people to hear this. Politicians don't want people to hear it. You know, Merrill Lynch doesn't want people to hear it, you know, in financial institutions and banks. But this is the truth. I just tell people, here's how much debt we have. And we have 127 trillion by my last conservative count, 8 times GDP. Here's what our demographics say. It predicted the boom. Now it's predicting a bust. So I'm not a bearish person. I've been bullish for 20 years, but the trends are down. And now with these bubbles, I've also studied every bubble in history. I got a whole chapter in the book, Chapter 5 on bubbles, this unpublished chapter on China, the greatest bubble of them all. You got to understand bubbles because people get in denial. And so I agree with you. People who hear this sort of stuff, who hear the truth, need to tell other people and warn them because people are going to get their ass handed to them. I hate to say this, but you know, you think the last crash was bad or the last recession. I think this is going to be more like the Great Depression because the longer they put this off and the more they pump up with all this artificial money, which again is just like taking an artificial drug to stay high and get higher. It's exactly like that. The worse the come down is going to be. So people really do need to be prepared. They need to get in safe investments now. Don't chase this bubble any further. It may go up another few percent. It's already bubbly. And I tell you, if I can show that, the one chart I should show people is that megaphone chart I alluded to earlier. If you look at it, and this is a very simple chart, nothing complicated about it. Each bubble has taken us to new highs, and each crash has taken us to new lows. This is exactly a similar pattern to how the market peaked when the last generation peaked in their spending, the Bob Hope or World War II generation. We had 3 higher peaks in 65, 68, and 72. And then we kept having lower lows. And of course, the big crash hit in 73, 74, and nobody saw that coming. This is a very obvious pattern. You talk about common sense. Our biggest indicator is the spending wave. It's just a 46-year lag for the predictable, quantifiable peak in spending of the average household in this country. And it would have told you decades ago that we would have an unprecedented boom from 1983 to 2007 with the rising baby boomers earning and spending more money, getting their kids in college and all that good stuff. And then we would have a downturn from 2008 to 2020 to 23. That's a very simple indicator. Common sense. People spend more money as they raise their families. Who doesn't understand that? We can quantify it. We can project this. We know when people are born, and I adjust for legal and illegal immigrants so that it's even more accurate. And so these are tools anybody can understand. Economists actually are too damn complicated. They get into all the complexities, all the detailed indicators, and end up missing the forest for the trees.
Well, you know why? It's because they want to specialize in different schools to then compete with each other, to have more textbooks, and then to confuse the whole thing so nobody can even understand it. That's what a lot of the big banks have been financing for 100 years, is basically conflating everything. But let me ask you this, and I want you to go through the charts and basically predict the next shoe to drop with our guest here today, Harry Dent. Let me ask you this question. Look, I agree with you that when the big depression really kicks off, we're already in an obvious long-term recession, depression in many areas of the world, depression in different sectors. it's a very managed economy, so some areas are boom, but the larger aggregate, just looking at it, is bust. And even the establishment's starting to admit that, and they're buying armored vehicles, and the Pentagon admits they're preparing for collapse, and Europe's preparing. So we know what's happening. But just like when you were on a few months ago, I said, look, I get that there is going to be deflation. That's probably where this goes. But the elites have been taking trillions, bailing out their too big to fails, giving it to themselves. And so you can see luxury items, Bentleys, big houses, helicopters, they're all double, triple, huge inflation because the elite are being smart. They're keeping it all to themselves. The problem is it leaks out. There is some trickle down. And so now it's causing inflation in a lot of areas. The QE, even though it's slowing, look at meat prices exploding. Look at everybody. I go out, everything's going up in price. When I was in the Caribbean, I said, why is stuff so expensive? They said, well, we're pegged to the dollar here. You know, I mean, my God, they were aware of it, and that's how inflation works. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's generally worse outside the country first, then those dollars start coming back in, the different M1, M2. So break down for me how we're seeing inflation, but also there is a deflation in business, deflation in some of the real markets, trillions of dollars chasing the stock market, pumping it up with QE dollars. Or I mean, aren't we seeing a stock market inflation, just like we see in some commodities? Yeah. Explain this to me.
Yeah, that's what we see. What you get, and this only happens once in a lifetime. That's why people don't understand it and see it. The last bubble economy we had was from World War I into the Roaring '20s. And in that time, you get debt growing way faster than the economy. Debt grew from 1983 to 2008 at its peak. Private and public debt together grew at 2.6 times our economy, our GDP. You can't do that for 25 years without getting a huge debt imbalance. So you get too much debt. That overstimulates the economy. The government then on top of that pours in money every time we have a recession and pushes down interest rates, and that causes even more borrowing and leverage. So you create more and more leverage, again, like a financial drug, like steroids or crack, financial enhancing drugs, and basically it creates bubbles. Businesses
Sure, I understand. So but I mean, explain to me how you're saying we're going to see depressionary stuff. But, I mean, economists didn't think till the 70s you could have inflation and depression, but then they had stagflation. Would this be hyper-stagflation? Or once it blows up and pops, is it so bad, then things will implode and then that will take out the inflation? I mean, what's happening?
Yeah, actually, Alex, in chapter 1 of my book, I show 4 seasons of our economy. Spring boom, a summer stagflation, high inflation, recession, which, again, economists never understood even when it happened. It's part of the model that repeats once in a lifetime all throughout history. Then you get a fall bubble boom. When that inflation falls, you get very low interest rates. That's when technologies move most mainstream, like microcomputers in this one and automobiles in the Roaring '20s and stuff like that. But when you get this bubble, people overborrow, overexpand, overleverage, and then when the generation cycles turn down, the bubbles burst, and you get a huge debt deleveraging. I mean, in the health industries, they call it a detox. Or if somebody's coming off drugs, they call it a detox. It's a debt detox. What happened in the Great Depression is that we went from debt being 190% of GDP down to 60%. We shed a ton of debt, trillions and trillions of dollars of debt, most of it private debt, because government deficits only tend to go up in downturns because their revenues go down and their costs go up. But we shed debt. The economy rebalanced. The bubbles burst. Real estate went back down to reality. Stocks crashed 89%. See, all these top 1% of people that are controlling all the assets, they're the ones that are going to get hit the worst when this bubble finally bursts and doesn't get cranked back up immediately by the government. The government has saved the banks and has saved the top 1%, and it's screwed the everyday household. What should have happened is we should have written down these mortgages, which were way overlent by banks, and they're the sophisticated people, not the everyday household, way overlent against high home valuations. Those home valuations need to come down where a young family can afford a home again. Mortgages need to be written off. If the average person had their mortgage written down in half in line with their house, they would be a lot better off instead of worse off. So it's the financial bubbles bursting. Dow goes from 17,000. My ultimate target is more like 3,000 to 4,000 down the road around 2020. That's going to destroy, 80% of people's wealth. You got $80 trillion in net worth that could be cut in half. That's money that disappears. Home prices drop, stock prices drop, all this sort of stuff. A lot of debt gets restructured and written off. That means, as I said earlier, money disappearing. It never comes back, or at least for a long time. And that creates deflation. So it's the opposite of the inflation, what I call summer season we saw in the 70s. And that's the way the economy goes. It goes from mild inflation in spring to high inflation in summer to falling inflation again, which everybody loves in fall, and then to deflation in winter. This happens over and over and again. It used to be every 50 to 60 years when our lifespans were that. Now our lifespans are more like 80, so this cycle is more like 80 years. Economists don't understand this.
I tend to get a little frantic on air with guests like Mr. Dent because we're not really talking about something that's rocket science here. It's historical. Now, he takes it and shows it in a scientific way so people can see the facts for themselves, but this is all common sense. And I've studied the establishment. They have created models where they think they're going to get more power out of this incremental collapse and domesticate us, break our will. But they're smoking their own dope. They can't manage their way out of a wet paper bag, and Obama vacations 4 months a year. So this is not going to go well. I don't know what's going to happen, but it runs from bad to worse with a lot of crazy mixed in. And I don't want to see this like some Planet of the Apes scenario. I mean, I've seen some of these governmental and corporate interests that have just wrecked other countries that were great nations, and like it happened to Chile and others. And I just am so sad to see them trying to turn this country into a third world nation. And I guess I'm involved in collective hand-wringing, just saying, how do we wake people up? And I think it's with the fundamentals, it's the basics. But what do you expect the political class in Europe, the United States, and other places to do when one of these crises goes over the edge, like Ukraine, ISIS in the Middle East, China is blowing up all the time? People say, where's the meltdown? Where's the blow-up? Look at the societal rot, the cities, the dozens of states about to go bankrupt, hundreds of cities already bankrupt, all the numbers just so astronomical. I mean, it's guaranteed. It's like a guy that's had 5 heart attacks, and he's 85 years old, and they're saying he's got to walk up the Empire State Building stairway. I mean, we don't know if he's going to have a heart attack this time, but he's going to have one soon is what I'm saying. I just feel like I'm sitting on top of a bunch of lit TNT, Harry.
Well, it is, in addition to our demographic cycles, I have an innovation cycle every 45 years, very simple. A geopolitical cycle that turns negative every 36 years from 9/11 into the end of this decade. This cycle continues to point down, and everything has gone wrong since then. The Middle East is an outright Shia-Sunni civil war that's going to blow up now that we're not willing to intervene anymore. And I don't think we should have in the first place in that case. China is going to have unbelievable social unrest when this bubble bursts. They've got 221 million unregistered rural citizens living in cities that aren't even legal people there. And they don't have any skills. They're tolerated like illegal immigrants here in the United States, and boom, they will not be tolerated in the bus. They're going to have huge problems. So things are going to get worse. And we've got strong polarization in this country. And, when this bubble bursts, it's going to be bad next time. And I think what I see happening is everybody's been telling people it's okay. The leaders in Europe, the leaders in the U.S., the Chinese, we can manage this. We can have a soft landing. We can engineer our economy. These people are going to lose credibility because they told us it was going to be okay. Warren Buffett's telling people it's going to be okay, and I think he should shut up. He's a great guy, but he shouldn't be talking about economics because he doesn't understand the economy, and he's misleading people. People are going to be very upset, and that's when they're going to listen to the people who told them the right thing in the first place. I'm popular with a certain group of people and in certain arenas like this. CNBC has me on just as a contrary person. They don't agree with me. They don't want to hear what I have to say, but people are going to remember people like you or I or other people said, hey, there's a problem here. Hey, there's a crisis coming. So people are going to naturally listen to those people and not to the people that told them everything's okay, we can manage it.
Sure. By the way, I'll do the full 3 hours tomorrow. I'm going to be on the nightly news tonight. A lot coming up. Alex Jones here. back in town. HarryDent.com/Alex Jones to find the unpublished chapter of his book, because it didn't come out in time to get in the bestseller. The Demographic Cliff. Excellent reading, by the way. It's unfortunate, but denying these things is only going to make it worse. So we're here just admitting how serious things have gotten. But continuing with our guest, in just the 4 or 5 minutes we have left in this segment, he was getting cut off, talking about he'd come on once he gets back from Australia. That's an interesting point you raise about Australia doing things better on several fronts. They're now moving to vote down carbon taxes. I'm seeing moves to try to repeal some of their anti-gun laws there. You've been there. I haven't been to Australia. You've been there recently. You used to go and assess companies, assess countries for major financial institutions out there like Bain. What would you say about a country like Australia versus China versus the United States?
Well, unfortunately, Australia's biggest customer for their exports is China, so they're going to feel that very hard. And they do have a big real estate bubble that they're in denial about. But Australia's government has almost no debt. Like you say, they have such potent immigration policies, and they're attracting highly qualified Asian citizens that may on average be more educated and more fluent than the average person in Australia. They're one of the few countries in the world, the Western rich countries, that actually has a larger echo boom or millennial generation than the baby boom. Our generation's not quite the size. Many countries in Europe have no echo boom at all. And many countries in East Asia, South Korea and Taiwan, no echo boom at all. So there's some really, when people don't have babies, you are basically cheating your future. So demographics will tell us which countries are strong and weak. Australia will probably survive this crisis better than any other wealthy country, or among the best, and it will do much better in the next boom, especially being on the Pacific Rim. So I tell you, man, I thought of moving to Australia. I love the country. I sell 5 times as many books per capita, given the smaller population there, than I do in the U.S. And they're great people, and I think they're really lucky. They have a lot of resources, and they've got better common sense government policies over there on just about everything. And you can't even jaywalk over there. They're very civil. You can't speed. They got cameras everywhere. So, they're kind of law-abiding. They have the best demographics in the Western world, and they're situated in a good part of the world for the future. Asia, China's going to be the problem in Asia, but every other part of Asia.
But you almost sound like you're saying it's the new Singapore. You're saying Australia's the new Singapore?
I wouldn't go with that, because it's not as much a financial center, but they are a wealthy country and a major exporter to the whole Pacific Rim Asian region, which is going to be the biggest growth energy in the future. I mean, most developed countries are not going to grow as fast, including the U.S. We got much better demographics than Europe. But again,
we should be attracting the high-skilled people, because we have aborted our next generation, so we need to import people. I get that. We just don't need welfare moms that'll vote Democratic. I mean, literally with 5 kids. I mean, this is national suicide.
Yeah, we have our quotas on the high-skilled people that we come over here and attract to educate in the best universities in the world, and then we let people run across the border. So it's not a good immigration policy.
It's a way to destroy a country. Harry Dent, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Sure. Enjoyed it.
Look forward to talking to him later. And again, Harry's a really great guy. I agree with him on the economics, but you can see what a nice guy is from the perspective. He's like, oh, they got cameras. They don't let you speed.